want to talk to you about where we are in the housing market at this point. You know, we're past the Super Bowl. In theory, we're like the checkered flag has been waved. And we're sort of on our way, toward the heat of, what's typically the high tide of the sales season. And there's a softness present here.
Yes. And it's interesting because I have been very optimistic.
I know.
Very optimistic.
Yes.
And let me just kind of reiterate my optimism. The reason I've been optimistic is because, mortgage rates essentially were on the rise in November and December.
Yes, they were.
And they ended up peaking on January 10th. Since then, they've come down. And so all of the data that we got for contracts signed in December, contracts signed in January, for me at least, were expected to show a slowdown. And then if you add to that the January winter freeze that delayed home touring, search activity, home tours, delayed closings and all that, you can expect an even more negative pressure on total home sales and transactions.
Can I tell you what I'm seeing as a lay person? Someone that might buy a house and doesn't have to worry about talking about the industry, writ large. I'm seeing interest rates, that are actually starting to look pretty good. Freddie Mac has it at 6.76% on a conventional 30-year. Now that's a national average. That's blended and might be, in this market might be higher.
Good credit.
Yeah.
And low debt to income.
Right.
You're even lower than that.
You're going to get lower. And I also see, like, now for the first time in a while, that a 15-year mortgage, if you can make that happen, it's below 6. So like that objection is starting to lessen, like the buyer objection. Home prices, I get reports. I've been a homeowner, in my present home for, over 20 years. And, of course I live in Illinois. So every realtor within 10 miles of me, contacts me and asks me, when I'm leaving, because they just presume that I will be leaving soon. And I'm starting to see like an absolute softening in the expectation around price on my home. Last summer, I want to say that it kind of peaked. I'm looking at maybe now in the reports that I'm getting maybe 10% less on a projection basis if I were to list my home. I'm not listing my home this year, but if I were, I'd be looking at about 10% less. So question, is this becoming a buyer's market? And we haven't just seen that yet.
Absolutely spot on. Okay. The pendulum has shifted. And by the way, you can check this out.
In select markets though, I mean, not everywhere.
Not everywhere. Zillow has a, really cool gadget. My favorite gadget anyway. It's called the Zillow Market Heat Index.
Uh-huh.
And, you can find it on Zillow.com/research where you have data, dashboards, market reports, and the Market Heat Index shows you basically, how things are shifting in favor of buyers. Anyway.
Well, bring it home for me. One last thought. Cause I mean, it's just like we're kind of pushing up.
The thing is, you get a report this week that shows pending home sales in January were down 4.6%.
Yep.
And
year over year.
No, on the month.
On a monthly basis.
6% on the month. Massive drop, right?
Right. Well,
and so like, when I see that, well, should I think it's demand is coming down and buyers are not coming back? Or should I think actually interest rates are higher? They only started slowing midway through the month. And at the same time, well, in January, we had the winter freeze and we also had the wildfires. So to me, that number.
It's really hard to sell a house that's been burned to the ground.
Yeah, and I feel bad for these people. That number,
And I'm not being funny at anyone's expense, but I'm just being literal.
And really, the drop in January, I start to see and feel like people, even experts, are starting to worry about this. And I'm sitting there like, guys, you might want to wait a little bit to see what happens in a month where you don't have so much noise in the data and where you can actually make sense of it. And here's my take on this. And we're going to see who's right on this, by the way. That's what I love about this podcast, because you can't hide. You make a forecast, you can't hide from it. My take is buyers are coming back with interest rates coming down and more options available to them on the housing market. You should see transactions show an uptick in the spring.
Okay.
Maybe we're going to get it delayed a little bit because we had a rougher winter, right? Though I do add one caveat though. The labor market has to hold up. You know, we started talking on one of our shows about the fact that the labor market was frozen in place and that we were starting to see an uptake in initial claims and continued claims, and then a sharp initial claims uptake because of federal government workers getting laid off. And so as long as the labor market holds up, we'll be fine. If the labor market doesn't hold up, that's when I start to worry. And so when people come up to me with these, oh, what do you see? Variations across markets. Should we be worried? I say, look at the labor market. Look at the labor market. Pay attention to what's happening in the labor market, and it will tell you everything you need to know about the housing market. Because you know what? Unemployed people can't get a mortgage.
That's right.
Okay. But ultimately, people move. They move because they find new jobs. And so if you have a strong labor market, you have a strong housing market. You have more transactions. They move because their life happens. They get married. They have a baby. Right. And so I say, look at the labor market. If the labor market holds up, housing will be just fine. You know, where the labor market goes, so does the housing market.